Alright guys, we need to talk about why I was wrong about Marathon, why Arc Raiders is doing so well, and the community reception to both these games. This is going to be a long one because we have a lot to talk about and a lot to cover after Marathon's first week of alpha is finally complete and Arc Raiders starting their tech test. I want to talk about the community reception and feedback to both these games and where the industry is at with this genre as a whole, and the studios that are really keeping to the essence and the core of what gaming should be and break down exactly why they are excelling at what they do. So with that, let's get into today's video, which is sponsored by absolutely nobody because I just want to have this talk with you guys, the fans, who not only love games but support these studios who make them in an era where creating a product seems to be more important than creating a good game. So after spending some time with the Marathon closed alpha this past week, I've come to realize that my initial enthusiasm may have been misplaced and honestly leaning negative. After Marathon's alpha launched, interest seemed to immediately die off from a vast majority of the player base, with gaming creators and journalists leaving reviews like, "After a few hours of playing the Marathon alpha, I'm not really hungry to jump back in." And the common feedback is that Marathon's alpha feels both watered down and overly punishing. Too punishing for casual players to enjoy, but also too bland to excite hardcore extraction fans. Everyone has really been echoing the same sentiment of concerns. For example, Shroud publicly called out the PC aim assist in Marathon, saying they just need to remove the mouse aim assist. PC players would rather improve their mechanics than have aim assist. Others have also noted that Marathon's lack of meaningful progression or innovative gameplay features. Many, however, have been clapping back with, "It's just an alpha," and to that I really need to say, is it? The game is 5 months out and I have never heard of an alpha taking place this close to a game's release, so that basically negates that argument entirely. And you can honestly really see all of this in the numbers. Marathon's community momentum is already stalling on the Steam charts and the alpha is already in trouble. It peaked at just below 7,000 concurrent players on day one, then nosedived after the first hour. After just a few days into the test, only 400 players remained in the test even after they announced that they were extending the test by 2 more days. Now honestly, that's a massive fall off of over 85% of everybody who had access to the game because they simply couldn't stand to play the gameplay loop. Pair that with the frustration that players have felt over not getting a key during the entire 2-week alpha test, and now you have players shouting about Bungie's blatant disregard for fans and others who have helped back the Discord and Marathon's community since day one. Honestly, the distribution of keys is what led to this echo chamber effect, turning the conversation more negative as every day of the alpha passed, which also caused players to leave in droves as well. While Marathon's first 2 weeks have been a bit rough, there are definitely some positives. The gameplay loop is smooth, the artistry still shines through in character design and the visuals, but for every person praising the game, there seems to be several people complaining about the design choices, among other things as well. Meanwhile, we have Arc Raiders kicking off its invite-only tech test, and the reception has been noticeably more positive than what we've seen with Marathon. I mean, the numbers really speak for themselves in this case. The charts show that Arc Raiders playtest has retained 86% of its player numbers who have been given access to the game, instead of losing basically that same number of players if you were Marathon. And really, in my opinion, this is the most telling part of the entire argument between the two games. Players will play what's good, and a lot of people may not like the reviews and reactions the average player gives, but the truth has always been reflected in the retention numbers. Clearly, there's a good way to do these tests and a bad way to do them, and it very clearly appears that Marathon has made an error in their judgment on this one. As far as Arc Raiders, from the reviews from creators and other content outlets, it really seems like nobody can put the game down. In Arc Raiders, you always feel that drive to drop back in for your next raid. I keep seeing the word fresh coming from many of my peers that are trying out Arc Raiders, with many of them saying they are thinking about it at work and wishing they could just play the game fully as it is. This is just a crazy contrast in the test between Arc Raiders and Marathon. You have a game on one hand where the players are begging to have it released as is, and a game on the other hand where they want it back in the oven for a few months until it can find its footing in the genre. Let's talk a bit about the major differences in game design that Marathon is lacking and where Arc Raiders succeeds. First, we need to talk a bit about the map design, and I'll just come right out and say it. Marathon's maps are extremely underwhelming. The size being extremely small completely aside, the lack of any meaningful verticality makes every map generally feel like a small flat square with nothing that makes the map feel alive or active. In contrast, Arc Raiders has medium and large size maps that are first and foremost shaped by the Arc AI that terrorized the landscape. All around you can find the rundown and broken robots, buildings, and landscape that have been battle-worn to show how long this fight has been going on for. So not only is the world itself telling a story, but it's shown in the gameplay. Not only do the maps themselves have a ton of verticality, but you're constantly changing elevation and running into scenery that fits exactly the type of environment that you would expect to be there. All of this lends to Arc Raiders maps feeling infinitely more alive and active than anything Marathon has shown off so far. As for the players themselves who traverse these maps, there's a huge advantage that Arc Raiders has with their persistent maps instead of Marathon's static maps. For those who don't know, persistent maps are a type of level where the player count is constantly refilled until a certain time remains on the map, meaning you will always have players walking around and exploring until the map time ends. With Marathon's static maps, you get about 12 players per map. This can lead to Marathon kind of feeling like a walking simulator because there's no longer any fear of danger in the map itself. If we pair that with the fact that Marathon has no solo mode and has said numerous times that it has no plans for a solo player mode due to the focus being on a quote team-based experience, Arc Raiders seats itself well ahead of the pack by allowing players to queue in solo, duo, or in a full squad of 3 while also offering the option to squad fill if you want that as well. Embark is really making all of the right moves here by allowing players more freedom to play the way they want instead of being told by studios like Bungie that we need to play the way they think it should be played. As far as price points go, both these these studios are offering their games at $40 a piece, containing a battle pass and in-game cosmetics as well. The kicker to this that makes it drastically different is that Arc Raiders is following the move that Helldivers 2 offered by offering premium currency to players who play the game, with Marathon seemingly offering the worst of both worlds with a pay-to-play game, paid content packages down the road, paid skins, and a paid battle pass, all for a mediocre shooter in 2025. That to me doesn't really sound like the best recipe for success, but at the same time, I don't own a dev studio, so I can only really comment on part of it so much. All of this ties into my broader point in the gaming industry as a whole. Lately, AAA games have become hollow product releases that are nothing more than an interface to sell you more and more things once you've bought into their games. Like Marathon's cinematic short featuring a recitation of Ozymandias while hyping players up for a game that ultimately isn't like what it marketed itself to be at all. I feel like I see this over and over again. Stunning CG trailers, massive hype, but the shipped product ends up being stripped of all content or is overly grindy to keep you playing their loop to buy their digital skins. Honestly, gamers are tired. People joke that modern shooters treat players like wallets and not fans, and honestly it's hard to even disagree with that kind of statement at all. Once every feature of a game that was historically achievable by simply playing the game feels paywalled, eventually players are really going to get tired of it. And in this climate, Arc Raiders isn't perfect in its monetization, but at least it's offering more than what you're seemingly about to get with Marathon. Which, as I'm saying all this, I can't help but think of the small handful of studios that are still just, creating games for the sake of the passion of making games, and allowing players to dive into a world that we traditionally don't see from games in the 2020s era. There's obviously a new title that immediately comes to everybody's mind when I say this, but let's talk about Larian Studios and Baldur's Gate 3 really quick beforehand, because I really do feel like that was the shift, so to speak, in not only game studios but players as well, that innovations can be made to classic formulas that don't dilute them down into these products. Baldur's Gate offered a near infinite amount of character customization and allowed you to make choices and freedom that gaming hadn't seen in arguably decades. Larian offered a full gameplay experience with hundreds of hours of gameplay and no paid add-ons, showing that indeed you can just get away with making a good game. The reception from fans was overwhelmingly positive, and the desire for Larian to carry the torch for Baldur's Gate was roaring strong. And the one that's on everybody's minds this week, Expedition 33, which was created by Sandfall Studios, which is a small French studio who created the game that will be hailed as the second coming of turn-based RPGs for the future. This team only had 30 developers on the game and so far have created an experience that is more memorable than many games in 2025 by showing that, again, you can create games that people simply enjoy without having to create crazy hype campaigns with multi-million-dollar cinematic trailers that ultimately lend to a crazy disappointing project. But as I say that, I kind of think, isn't that kind of the point of all of that really? Like, isn't the point of all of that stuff to get us so hyped up that we look past the obvious tactics that entice us to buy? I guess what I'm saying here is that gamers are getting wiser every day to how business is done, and we are honestly getting a bit tired of having it shoved down our throats. We have shown that we are more than willing to give studios our money to purchase millions of copies of their game as long as they simply deliver a good product. Word of mouth in the gaming world in 2025 is paramount and worth its weight in gold. The moment you get bad press for being another scummy game that tries to hawk its skins, then you're going to get called out for that and will be nearly impossible to come back from such a negative initial view. This is why Arc Raiders is currently in such a better spot than Marathon. Arc Raiders is getting great reviews and being talked about positively because the devs over at Embark have done just that. They created a good game in a compelling world that is fun. Marathon, in contrast, hasn't shown that they will be able to stand apart in the extraction space, with their art direction being the main selling point over the gameplay itself. Everything here suggests that Marathon will struggle post-launch unless Bungie quickly pivots, perhaps by reworking the difficulty, adding more progression, or opening up solo play. But by contrast, Arc Raiders really has the wind at their back, and I hope we hear more news about a potential launch sooner rather than later. If Arc Raiders continues to deliver and minimizes the fluff, I believe we are in for a successful life cycle for the game. But really, in the end, it's all about keeping that spark for gaming alive. Bungie's Marathon really had the right marketing, but didn't really follow through on the gameplay at all. Arc Raiders is simply the newcomer from Embark and doing a lot of things right. So that's really all I'm going to rattle about today, guys. If you would like to continue the conversation below in the comments, please go ahead and do so. Please subscribe, please like the video, and I will see you guys in the next one.